You're a failure. You're a loser. My son Ethan shouted at me, his wife Lily standing beside him, right in the middle of Mother's Day, at an elegant restaurant. Their cruel laughter echoed through the room as I sat there, seemingly defeated, just the frail old woman everyone assumed I was. But what they didn't realize was that in my purse, I had a small golden envelope that would turn everything upside down within minutes. Calmness that surprised even myself allowed me to slowly slide this modest gift across the glass table. Lily looked at it with contempt and muttered, "What is this now? Another pathetic attempt to seek attention." Her eyes gleamed with that cruelty I had witnessed countless times, the expression that made me feel like an annoying insect they could ignore and tolerate. The other guests watched silently, eager for another spectacle of family humiliation. But when I opened my mouth and began to speak, my voice icy and composed, panic started to spread across their faces. "Explain to your wife why the $15,000 a month allowance you receive will vanish in the next 5 minutes," I said, fixing my gaze on Ethan. My tone was so calm, it starkly contrasted with the storm I was about to unleash. "And tell Edward and Grace, your in-laws, why the $3 million mansion they live in and the 3 luxury cars in the garage will disappear before dessert is finished. Oh, and don't forget to explain to your partner, Daniel, why the company you believe is yours will be gone by the time we leave this restaurant." I savored every second of their growing confusion as I slowly rose from my chair, feeling the weight of every eye focused on me. That's when real panic began to show. Ethan turned pale as if he'd seen a ghost, cheeks losing all color, lips trembling slightly. Lily dropped her wine glass, crimson liquid spreading across the pristine white tablecloth like spilled blood as she babbled incoherently. The other guests fell silent, a suffocating hush that sliced through the air. Ethan's trembling hands betrayed him as he stammered, Mom, what are you talking about? You have nothing. We've been supporting you for years. You live off the charity we send $500 a month to survive in that miserable little house." "Ah, my dear son," I responded with a smile long buried beneath decades of silent suffering and careful planning. It was a smile that carried concealed pain and months of scheming. "I think it's time you met the real Doreen." My words hovered like a death sentence over the table. I watched as terror seized their faces, realizing that something monumental was about to change forever. The golden envelope contained just a fraction of what awaited them. Inside were the original deeds to the mansion where they now dwelled, signed in my name 15 years ago, the titles for the 3 Mercedes-Benz cars they believed were theirs, purchased with my money and registered under my ownership through shell companies. And most devastatingly, documents proving I was the rightful owner of 80% of the construction company they thought they had built entirely on their own effort and talent. "No, this can't be," Lily whispered, her voice cracking as she unrolled the documents with trembling hands, like leaves in a gust. Her face turned a ghastly gray I had never seen before. "This must be fake. You live in that decrepit little house in the poor neighborhood. You drive that beaten-up car that makes strange noises. You buy used clothes at flea markets." Her carefully crafted world of lies and arrogance crumbled before her eyes, revealing that the poor old woman she'd humiliated for years was actually a millionaire who had kept quiet while watching her every move, each betrayal, each cruelty. Yet I was merely getting started, too eager to tell the story of my ultimate revenge. To grasp how I reached that moment of sweet justice and saw terror reflecting in their eyes, I must take you 6 months back to when I made the smartest choice of my life, becoming the invisible woman within my own family. 6 months ago, I was exactly what I appeared to be, a 64-year-old grandmother living a humble, seemingly simple life. My daily routine was as predictable as clockwork. Every morning at 6, I awoke in my small, two-bedroom home in the Oakwood district, brewed coffee in an old flea market pot, and sat in a faded armchair to read the newspaper, while the antique radio played the morning news. My house was intentionally modest cream-colored walls, needing paint, furniture that had seen better days. I had bought secondhand appliances that worked but looked tired. My refrigerator was covered with family photos, smiling next to Ethan and Lily. Images of happiness I now knew were just illusions, long shattered. Ethan, my only son, was 42 and appeared to be the successful man he always claimed to be. Tall, with his dark hair expertly combed, dressed in expensive suits, wearing Swiss watches worth more than most people's annual income. He drove a silver Mercedes and lived in a mansion in Beacon Heights, proudly calling himself the founder of Herrera Construction, an empire he said he built through his brilliance and hard work. Lily, my daughter-in-law, was the perfect trophy wife, platinum blonde, with hair down to her waist, always impeccable acrylic nails, and a wardrobe full of designer dresses that shift with the seasons. Her lips were perpetually plump from Botox, eyebrows microbladed to perfection, and her makeup took over an hour to apply every morning. She drove a red Mercedes, gifted by Ethan for her birthday, and spent her days at the spa, the gym, and luxury boutiques in the city's most expensive mall. Her parents, Edward and Grace, lived with them in the mansion. Edward, aged 65, had retired early thanks to Ethan's generosity, which had arranged a lucrative job at the construction firm. Grace, 62, tended to the garden and cooked for the family. Both treated Ethan as if he were their personal savior, the hero who rescued their daughter from mediocrity. Every Sunday, I would visit the mansion for family lunch. I arrived in my small white 2010 car, which made strange noises as it climbed the steep hills to Beacon Heights. I always brought a homemade dessert chocolate cake, coconut flan, oatmeal cookies, gifts accepted with polite but patronizing smiles, accompanied by comments like, "Oh, you shouldn't have," or "Such thoughtfulness, as always." The family's dynamic was painfully clear. Me, the second-class guest, the pensioner depending on their charity, occupying the least comfortable chair, served on the oldest plates. My opinions were dismissed with nervous laughter. Lily often found subtle ways to remind me of my supposed insignificance. "How are you managing with the house expenses, Damaris?" she would ask, her voice falsely caring, while slicing her imported steak. "I hope the $500 Ethan sends you each month is enough. We know it's a lot for someone your age." Her smile didn't touch her eyes, the smile of someone eager to diminish. Ethan, for his part, would speak to me as if I were a child, saying, "Mom, you have to understand, maintaining this house costs a lot. The taxes are $8,000 annually, not counting utilities, maintenance, food for 5 people. We're doing our best to help you with your stipend, but sometimes it's not enough for us either." It always crushed me to see how they had constructed a perfect narrative, a story, where they were the generous benefactors, and I was merely a grateful recipient. Daniel, Ethan's business partner, visited frequently to discuss deals, always introduced me as Ethan's mother living on a small pension, and claimed they helped because family was the most important thing. Daniel himself, a 45-year-old, bald with a visible belly, tried to hide his humble origins behind expensive vests. His speech oozed condescension, as if speaking to an elderly person was a privilege. Mrs. Dearest, what a pleasure to see you. Ethan always speaks of how proud he is to care for you in your old age, he'd say, with a smirk. Sundays after lunch, while the men retreated to the study to discuss business over bottles of fine whiskey, Lily would pull me into the kitchen under the guise of helping with dishes. It was there that she truly showed her true nature, shedding her polite daughter-in-law mask. Dearest, she would say, one particularly cruel Sunday, drawing out each word while swirling her crystal glass with exaggerated care. I think it's time we talk frankly. You're getting older, and frankly, these weekly visits are becoming a burden for all of us. Ethan works hard all week. Sundays remain his only day off, and the constant worry of entertaining her has become utterly draining. But everything was about to change forever. For what they couldn't possibly know was that the real Damaris had been watching closely, taking notes, and preparing her boldest move yet. The following months unraveled into a relentless descent filled with increasingly elaborate and merciless humiliations, as if they had decided that keeping up appearances with her was no longer necessary. Evan and Sarah began revealing their true disdain openly, without restraint or pretense. Each Sunday became a fresh occasion to remind her just how insignificant she was in their idyllic lives. The first unmistakable sign that something had shifted happened one February Sunday, when she arrived at the mansion as usual, carrying her homemade carrot cake and a hopeful smile. Sarah answered the door dressed in a pink tracksuit worth more than her monthly rent, and she didn't bother to hide her lack of warmth. "Oh, you're here," she said with exaggerated boredom, as if her presence was a terrible inconvenience she had forgotten she'd have to endure. She looked at the cake box in her hands with obvious disdain. "Another one of your homemade creations, Damaris," she scoffed. "We've told you 1,000 times we have a personal chef. We don't need you to bring these things." The word things sounded as if she were describing hazardous waste. Furthermore, Frances was on a doctor-prescribed diet. Edward was diabetic. She was watching her figure, and Evan was avoiding sugar. Clearly, no one in the house would eat what she brought. But she didn't stop there. She led her into the kitchen, and right before her eyes, heaved her cake directly into the trash without even opening the box. "It's better if we don't waste time pretending someone might actually try it," Sarah declared, washing her hands as if she'd touched something contaminated. "Honestly, Damaris, I think it's time you accepted that your days of being useful in the kitchen are over." Evan had adopted a new approach to demonstrate his superiority, constantly talking about money, always in a way that made her feel like a beggar. During their lunches, he started discussing household expenses openly, mentioning astronomical figures that he claimed overwhelmed him. "The pool maintenance costs us $1,200 a month," he would say, while slicing into imported salmon. "The gardener costs $2,000, the maid another $1,500, not to mention the gas for the 3 cars, which easily reaches $800 per week." Then he'd look her straight in the eye, adding, "That's why, Mom, I hope you understand why your allowance is sometimes late. $500 might not seem like much to you, but for us, it's a real effort with all these fixed costs." That cruel irony pierced her deeply, knowing he was painfully aware that $500 was not a trivial sum for someone supposedly living on a modest pension. Sarah had perfected the art of social humiliation. She started inviting her friends from the tennis club during Damaris's Sunday visits, seemingly to flaunt her perfect life, but more to use her as an example of what they didn't want to become. "Girls, let me introduce you to my mother-in-law," she'd say, with a fake smile, as Damaris sat on the oldest sofa in the living room. "She's such a brave woman, isn't she? lives alone in a tiny, modest house and manages on so little. We try to help her as much as we can, but you know how it is. You can't solve everyone's life for them. Her friends, women between 35 and 40, all with faces tightened by plastic surgery and rehearsed laughter, would gaze at her with a mixture of pity and superiority. "Oh, how admirable," one Samantha, with obvious hair extensions, would say. "I couldn't live without my Mercedes, my European vacations, my beauty treatments. It's just incredible how older people settle for so little." Their social disdain deepened further when they assigned her household chores during visits. "Damaris, since you're here, could you help me clean the living room windows?" Sarah would ask, with a venomous sweetness. "Francis is busy with dinner, and frankly, at your age, you need to stay active so you don't become rusty." They handed her a rag and a cheap cleaning spray while they lounged on imported cocktails, gossiping about the country club. But the final straw came one March Sunday, when they rearranged the dining room to maximize space. Her usual seat at the main table vanished, replaced by a folding chair in a corner. "We bought a new dinner set for 8, Evan explained dismissively, avoiding her gaze. "And your spot was disrupting the symmetry of the table." From her new corner, she overheard their conversations, plans for trips, expensive restaurants, jewelry Sarah wanted for her next birthday, all expressed in terms she could never afford. "We're thinking of going to the Bahamas in April," Sarah announced, admiring her manicured nails. "I booked a presidential suite at $5,000 a night. But Evan says I deserve it after all the stress I've been under." She shot her meaningful glances when mentioning stress, as if Damaris' mere existence were the root of all her problems. Daniel's frequent visits brought increasingly exclusive, elaborate business talks. They discussed multi-million-dollar contracts, construction projects expected to generate six-figure profits, and real estate ventures poised to make them even richer. The way they spoke of the company's financial structure was particularly revealing. "The construction of the Los Pininos residential complex will net around $2.5 million, Daniel explained, while reviewing documents on his tablet. "The land is worth $800,000. The construction will cost about $2 million, and we already have pre-sales for $4 million. Pure mathematics," Evan would affirm, nodding confidently as if he were the mastermind behind the initial capital of these ventures. He would shamelessly boast, "What I'm most proud of is having built all this from nothing. It took vision, intelligence, and relentless effort." But the cruelty became most evident when they discussed her future as if she were invisible, an obstacle to be eliminated. "I think Damaris is becoming too much of a burden," Sarah said one afternoon, while touching up her makeup in the dining room mirror. "She can't take care of herself anymore, and honestly, these Sunday visits are disrupting our family life." "You're right," Evan replied without looking up from his phone. "And her house is falling apart, and the neighborhood's getting dangerous. Any accident at her age could be fatal." His words sounded like they were discussing a logistical issue, not his own mother. Then, on the Sunday after April Fool's Day, everything changed. The day her world was shattered, but not in the way they expected. She arrived as usual, but something in the air felt different, thicker, more tense, as if they had been waiting for her to arrive, to enact a plan they'd been carefully plotting. Sarah met her at the door with a smile that chilled her to the core, too wide, too fixed, like a predator's grin. "Damaris, so glad you arrived early," she said, guiding her into the living room with exaggerated gentleness that immediately set her on high alert. "We have some important things to discuss today, things that will change your life for the better. We're very excited to share our ideas with you." Her words sounded rehearsed, as if she'd spent weeks practicing this speech in front of a mirror. Evan sat in his Italian leather armchair, dressed in one of his $3,000 suits, and for the first time in months, he looked her directly in the eyes when she entered. "Mom, sit here," he said, pointing to the sofa in front of him, instead of the folding chair in the corner where she'd been relegated. "We want to talk to you about something very important, something we've been planning because we love you and care deeply about your well-being." Her gut clenched. Something felt terribly wrong. In recent months, the only times they'd shown her kindness were when they needed a favor, asking her to leave early or skip the next visit under some flimsy pretext. This sudden display of warmth was more frightening than all their previous humiliations combined. Sarah perched herself on the arm of Evan's chair, matching her pose from a magazine cover, and began, "We've been watching you closely these past few weeks, Damaris, and we've realized that living alone is no longer safe for you. Your health is declining. Your house is falling into disrepair. The neighborhood is becoming dangerous. As your family, we can't allow our matriarch to remain in such conditions." Evan nodded seriously, as if they discussed national security. "Mom, you're 64. At that age, any fall, health emergency, or accident could be fatal if you're on your own. What if you slipped in the bathroom and no one was around to help? Or had a heart attack in the dead of night, unable to reach anyone?" His reasoning sounded logical enough on the surface. Yet there was something in his tone that sent a chill through me, like prey being stalked by relentless predators. Sarah rose from the armrest of the chair and began pacing the room in exaggerated, theatrical moves, as if delivering a high-stakes sales pitch. "That's why," she declared with a deliberate flair, "we've found the perfect solution for all our worries. We've spent months researching, visiting facilities, consulting specialists, and we've finally discovered the ideal place for you." From her purse, she pulled out a sleek brochure decorated with vibrant photos and settled beside me on the sofa, leaning so close I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with something else, something that struck me as pure dread. "It's called Sunset Gardens Retirement Community," she said, flipping open the glossy pages with forced enthusiasm. "A luxurious retirement complex designed specifically for people your age who deserve to enjoy their golden years with dignity and comfort." The images showcased facilities resembling a five-star hotel private rooms overlooking lush gardens, elegant dining halls with white tablecloths, recreation rooms with large screen TVs, a small chapel, and a library. Photos captured smiling seniors playing cards, strolling through immaculately groomed gardens, participating in dance classes and craft workshops. "Look at these amenities." Sarah continued turning the pages as if she were selling a dream vacation. "They have 24-hour medical care with trained nurses, a professional chef, daily recreational programs, housekeeping and laundry, even a beauty salon. Imagine, dear one. You wouldn't have to worry about cleaning your house, cooking, grocery shopping. Everything would be taken care of." Evan leaned closer, clasping his hands as if revealing the greatest secret in the world. "And best of all, Mom, we're going to pay for all of it. The monthly fee is $2,500 plus extras, but you won't need to spend a dime. We'll cover everything because you're part of this family, and we love you." My world seemed to freeze. $2,500 a month was 5 times what I was supposed to survive on. If I truly managed on $500 a month, as they believed then, this generosity would cost them a huge sacrifice. Yet something in their eyes told me this plan wasn't about filial love or genuine care. When would I have to move? I asked quietly, trying to keep my voice steady while my mind spun with suspicions about their real motives behind this seemingly caring gesture. Sarah and Evan exchanged a glance quick but loaded with meaning, a silent message of conspiracy, relief, as if they had just overcome some insurmountable obstacle. Well, Sarah said casually, we've already made a tentative reservation for next month. Thought it would be perfect for you to move right after Mother's Day. That way, you can celebrate one last special occasion with us at home, then start anew in a setting better suited to your needs. Less than 3 weeks away, Mother's Day loomed. They were giving me an ultimatum disguised as a gift, a family exile wrapped in concern and wrapped with bows of false love. But what terrified me the most was realizing they'd probably been planning this for months, perhaps even years. Evan added in a tone that tried to sound reassuring, but felt more like a threat. We've already spoken to a real estate agent about selling your house. The market's not great in your neighborhood, but we think we can get around $30,000 if we sell quickly. That money could cover almost a year's stay at Sunset Gardens. So really, it's like your own home, paying for your future comfort. My brain processed that number. My modest house, which I'd bought a decade earlier for $60,000 and was now worth at least $80,000, was valued by them at a mere $30,000 as part of their financial plan. To them, that was a bargain away to rid themselves of me while appearing kind and generous, sacrificing some cash in the process. They had scheduled the visit for this Wednesday, getting me to see the amenities, chat with residents, glance at my supposed future room. People your age need to be surrounded by peers, those with similar interests and life experiences, Sarah said with an eager smile. But then, unexpectedly, Daniel arrived for an impromptu business meeting and everything changed. While Sarah and Evan retired to the study to discuss construction plans, I remained in the living room, pretending to read a magazine, but really processing what I'd just heard. During that wait, Sarah made her biggest mistake. She left her phone on the coffee table while she went to touch up her makeup in the bathroom. On the lock screen, I saw a message notification that wasn't meant for me. It wasn't spying, exactly. It was accidental, yet the first lines were perfectly visible. Did you convince the old hag to go to the nursing home yet? Mom says once she's gone, you can remodel the whole house without her in the way, read the message. Dad's already excited to use the garage for his projects, it continued. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about Evan and Sarah. It was about her entire family, in the know, waiting eagerly for my departure as if it was some great liberation. Carefully, I rose from the sofa and approached her phone. With trembling hands, I swiped upward to reveal more conversation messages that shattered my soul yet ignited a fury I never knew I possessed. The words were like daggers, piercing through my heart, but also like an electric shock, awakening something dormant deep inside. I read further, each sentence exposing the true depth of their plan. Sarah had written just 2 days earlier, "The old woman is so desperate to feel loved, she's falling for the whole nursing home scam." Evan acted like we're making a huge financial sacrifice, but honestly, the monthly $2,500 saves us a fortune by not having her here on Sundays eating our expensive food. Her sister's reply was even more alarming. "Ha ha, you guys are so clever. Once she's admitted, it'll be easier to gradually cut her off. Old folks in those places get depressed, antisocial. In a year, she probably won't even want to see you." But the message that made my breath seize momentarily was the one that hit hardest. Dad's already talked to his lawyer friend. If you can get her declared mentally incompetent because of her age, after 6 months, you can apply for guardianship and take control of whatever savings she has. Even if it's just a few thousand, every penny counts. My mind reeled at this revelation. These weren't just plans to move me out. They intended to have me declared incapable, to steal every penny of my supposed modest savings. The irony was almost laughable. If they knew my net worth topped $15 million, they'd probably be plotting my murder, not my institutionalization. I hurriedly snapped pictures of the messages on my phone before Sarah returned, my hands now steady with purpose. Over the next half hour, as they continued their business meeting in hushed tones, I silently crafted a plan for revenge, one as meticulous as a general preparing for war. That evening, in the solitude of my modest home, I began to orchestrate my counterattack, channeling every ounce of resolve. First, I contacted my lawyer, Mark Vance, 58, who had managed my legal affairs for over 20 years. Only a handful of people knew the true extent of my wealth, and Mark was one of them, respecting my preference to keep a low profile. "Damaris," he answered, concern evident in his voice when I recounted what I'd found. "This is more serious than we thought. If they try to have you declared incompetent, it could create complex legal challenges, especially if they've got accomplices inside the courts. We need to move quickly and carefully." Over the following days, Mark and I worked tirelessly to establish what he called the most fortified protection network he'd ever devised. First, we updated my wills and legal documents, clearly asserting I was of sound mind and that any future attempt to declare me incapable would be fraudulent. Next, we assembled all evidence of my true net worth deeds to my mansion, registered under my name via the shell company Pacific Investments Inc., titles for my 3 luxury Mercedes-Benz vehicles, bought with direct bank transfers, and corporate documents proving I owned an 80% stake in Herrera Construction through a web of anonymous trusts and holding companies. But the most shocking evidence came from the bank records, revealing the $10,000 monthly transfers that had been funneling into their accounts for the past 8 years. Every penny was coming from my own accounts, routed through various financial institutions to disguise their origin masquerading as external investments or government contracts. Mark had been meticulous in designing this operation. "What we did here," he explained as we examined the documents in his office, "was create a scenario where you could truly see your family's real character, free from the influence of money. They've been living off your generosity all these years. But since they believed those funds came from outside sources, their actions reflect who they really are when they think they have nothing to lose or gain from you." The third phase of my plan involved hiring a private investigator, Arthur Miller, a 53-year-old former cop who specialized in family-related fraud cases. With his average height, unremarkable build, and forgettable face, Arthur could go unnoticed easily. But his mind was a sharp, data-processing machine. "Mrs. Dearest," he told me during our first meeting at a discreet downtown cafe, "I've seen many family abuse cases in my career, but this one has elements that make it particularly intriguing. Your son and daughter-in-law have built an entirely false life, supported by your money, yet they've come to believe their own lies about their success." Over the next 2 weeks, Arthur examined every detail of Evan and Sarah's financial situation. The findings were even more shocking than I had anticipated. Without the $10,000 monthly transfers, they had no real income whatsoever. The successful construction company they boasted about was merely a front completely dependent on contracts I secretly financed through my business contacts. Look at these records, Arthur showed me during our second meeting, unrolling a folder full of documents. Your son owes over $200,000 on credit cards and bank loans, while your daughter-in-law has accumulated an additional $150,000 on luxury purchases and cosmetic procedures. The mortgage on the mansion is 3 payments overdue, and they've only avoided foreclosure because you've been covering it through the trust. The most devastating discovery concerned Daniel, the so-called business partner. That man, Arthur continued, has no capital invested in the company. His stake is fictitious. He's essentially a frontman managing projects. Evan claims 10% commission for his involvement, but Evan takes credit for all the successes. The fourth step of my plan was the most delicate. I needed irrefutable proof of their true intentions without alerting them to my presence. Mark discreetly helped me install tiny recording devices inside the mansion during one of my Sunday visits. Because I had unrestricted access and they regarded me as harmless, it was surprisingly straightforward to hide small microphones in the study, the kitchen, and the main living room. Over the following 2 weeks, those recordings confirmed my worst fears. Evan and Sarah weren't merely planning to harm me. They had already begun making arrangements to sell my property. They had forged my signature on preliminary documents and were working with a corrupt notary to expedite the sale. I overheard Evan on the phone, speaking with someone who sounded like a lawyer. We need to push through the legal guardianship process as quickly as possible. We have fake medical reports indicating her mental decline, and several witnesses are ready to testify she's acting irrationally. The lawyer's response chilled me to the bone. Mr. Evan, with the documentation you've provided, I can guarantee that in less than 4 months, you'll have full legal control over all your mother's assets. The process will cost around $20,000, but given you expect to recover at least $100,000 from selling the house, it's a highly profitable investment. The moment that sealed their fate, though, came when I overheard Sarah on the phone with her sister. That old fool is so eager to move into that luxury home, she said. She even thanked me for taking such good care of her. She had no idea that Sunset Gardens was essentially a prison for the elderly, where they medicated her into a zombified state. In 6 months, she wouldn't even remember her own name. It was time to act. Mother's Day was only 5 days away, and I had prepared everything for what would be the most devastating performance of my life. The morning dawned clear, a sky that seemed to mock the storm about to unfold. I woke at dawn, not because I had to, but because the adrenaline coursing through me kept me awake. Today, the submissive, broken woman they had known as Dearest would die forever, giving birth to the woman I truly was meant to be. Grooming myself meticulously that morning, I chose a deep red dress I had discreetly purchased the week before. Not ostentatious, but elegant enough to deliver a subtle message. I styled my hair simply but impeccably, applied light makeup to look healthy and alert. For the first time in years, I wore the pearl necklace I inherited from my mother, the only luxury I permitted myself in public without suspicion. In my purse, I carried a golden envelope containing copies of all the legal documents, establishing my actual financial identity, crucial proof of my authenticity. But more importantly, I held something they would never expect: the instant cancellation contracts for all the services, properties, and benefits they'd been unwittingly enjoying. At exactly noon, I arrived at the mansion as scheduled. Sarah had organized a special Mother's Day lunch, inviting not only her parents, Edward and Francis, but also Daniel and his wife, 2 couples from the country club, and surprisingly, an older man Evan introduced as Dr. Ramsey, a geriatrics specialist. His presence confirmed my suspicion. They intended to use this gathering to begin the process of declaring me mentally incompetent. They likely expected I'd say or do something during the meal that the doctor could interpret as cognitive decline. "Mom," Evan said loudly and exaggeratedly, as if parodying a performance, "you look so beautiful today. That dress fits you perfectly, doesn't it, Sarah?" His tone was theatrical, almost like amateur theater. Despite this, the guests smiled and nodded politely, playing along with what was clearly a facade. Sarah approached to give me a quick hug, lasting just 3 seconds, enough for the guests' cameras, no genuine affection behind it. "My dear," she whispered in my ear, "today is going to be very special. We have lots of surprises prepared for you." Her voice, though sweet, carried the venom I knew all too well. The dining room was decorated with fresh flowers, the table set with the finest dinnerware. They had assigned me the seat at the head of the table, a position of honor that immediately prickled my nerves. For months, they had relegated me to folding chairs in a corner, and now, suddenly, I was being treated like the queen of the celebration. Clearly, this was part of their secret plan. The first half hour was filled with seemingly normal family chatter. Guests congratulated me on having such a wonderful and caring family, commented on how lucky I was to have a successful son and devoted daughter-in-law. Daniel spoke at length about Evan's impressive business achievements, while his wife praised Sarah's impeccable taste. But beneath the surface, a silent tension crackled. Sarah and Evan exchanged knowing glances, waiting for just the right moment to execute the next move. Dr. Ramsey watched me carefully, taking mental notes with every word and gesture. It was as if I was performing the role of an innocent grandmother while they plotted my downfall behind the scenes. That moment came during dessert. Sarah rose gracefully, holding a glass of champagne, her smile dazzling but sinister. "Dear guests," she announced theatrically, "today we celebrate not only Mother's Day, but also the start of a new chapter in Dearest's life." All eyes turned toward me, the room thickening with anticipation. Evan placed a hand on my shoulder, an action that seemed affectionate but felt more like a jailer's grip. Speaking with false emotion, he continued, "We've made the difficult but necessary decision to help our mother move into a place where she can receive the care she needs. Sunset Gardens is a top-tier retirement residence where she'll be among her peers and have access to 24-hour medical attention." The room murmured in approval. "Such dedicated children," one of Sarah's friends commented. "It's admirable how they've sacrificed their own comfort to ensure her well-being." Even Dr. Ramsey nodded solemnly, as if witnessing an act of filial virtue. Then Sarah dropped the bomb she had prepared for weeks. And to make this transition easier, she declared with fake tears glistening in her eyes, "We've also decided to sell the little house where Mom Dearest has lived for so many years. The proceeds will help cover her expenses at Sunset Gardens, ensuring she can live comfortably without being a financial burden." The room grew silent, everyone pretending to understand the supposed kindness behind what was essentially a final act to strip me of everything. It was at that exact moment that I decided I had heard enough. For 64 years, I had allowed others to make decisions for me, to speak in my place, to define who I was and what I deserved. But that day, before an audience of accomplices and witnesses, I resolved it was time for them to meet the real Damaris. I slowly rose from my chair, feeling every eye upon me with eager anticipation. Sarah and Evan wore smiles cloaked in arrogance, as if convinced they held complete control over the scene. Yet, when I took the golden envelope from my purse and gently placed it on the glass table, their smiles began to fade like mist dissipating in cold air. Before we carry on with this very emotional celebration, I stated in a tone so calm it sharply contrasted with the chaos I was about to unleash. There are a few things you all need to understand about me. The ensuing silence was so profound that the ticking of the grandfather clock from across the hall became deafening. Sarah grew visibly pale, and Evan froze, as if sensing that something monumental was about to unfold. I fixed my gaze on my son and spoke directly to him. Evan, I believe it's high time you explain a few very interesting truths to everyone here. My voice remained serene, yet it carried an authority none of them had ever heard from me before. First, I said, explain to your wife why the $10,000 monthly allowance you both receive will vanish permanently within the next 5 minutes. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, and Daniel nearly choked on his wine, trembling as he processed my words. But I wasn't finished. You might also want to tell your in-laws, Edward and Francis, why the exquisite $2 million mansion where they've been living comfortably is about to disappear before we finish dessert. Each word struck with precision, designed to wound where it would hit hardest. Pausing just a moment to relish their escalating panic, I added, and finally, can you explain to your partner, Daniel, why the construction company you believe you built with your own talent is doomed to fail before we leave this restaurant? Rising from my seat completely, I watched as terror visibly crept across their faces like a contagious disease. The silence afterward was almost tangible, thick and oppressive. Evan's mouth hung open in disbelief, as if unable to process what was happening, while Sarah turned so pale that her foundation couldn't hide the ashen hue overtaking her face. The guests stared back and forth, bewildered, instinctively sensing that they were witnessing something historic unfold before their eyes. Finally, Evan stammered, his voice cracking like that of a teenage boy. Mom, what? What are you talking about? You don't have any money. We've been helping you for years. His words fragmented, as if his mind refused to accept that his entire world was about to collapse. I offered a serene smile, surprising even myself, and slowly unsealed the golden envelope as if I were revealing a treasured gift. Oh, my dear son, I said softly, let me show you exactly what I mean. I extracted the first document and laid it on the table where everyone could see. It was the original deed to this magnificent mansion, signed and registered in my name 15 years ago through my company, Pacific Investments. Daniel shot up from his chair so abruptly that he knocked it over, stumbling closer to examine the paper. That's impossible, he muttered, scrutinizing the document as if it were written in an alien language. Evan, I continued, you told me you purchased this house with proceeds from your first construction contracts. Because that's what I believed, Evan whispered, his voice almost inaudible. Trembling, he took the document in his hands, as though expecting the letters to change before his eyes. Mom, this has to be a mistake, he stammered, desperately trying to make sense of it. But I was already pulling out more papers. Next, I announced, are the titles for the 3 Mercedes-Benz cars you all cherish. I placed them one by one on the table, like royal flushes in poker. The silver one, Evan drives, was bought with a $120,000 transfer from my personal account at the National Bank. The red car Sarah drives costs $110,000, also from that account. And the black one, used by Edward and Francis, is valued at $95,000. Sarah began trembling visibly. No, 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 she repeated desperately, clutching the papers as if to ward off reality. You live in that miserable little house. You wear old clothes. Your car makes strange noises. Her voice grew shrill, bordering on hysteria. Oh, yes, I replied with a grin that probably looked sinister. My little act. Did you know I've been living exactly the life I wanted you to think I do? My real home is in the financial district, a 30,000 square foot penthouse with sweeping views of the city. My noisy Volkswagen is a collector's edition, kept precisely because I like its character. But I also own a BMW and a Lexus, safely tucked away in my private garage. Murmurs spread among the guests, some recording every moment of what had become the most explosive family drama they had ever seen. Dr. Ramsay, there to assess my mental state, watched with a mix of astonishment and professional fascination. But the coup de grace was the moment I produced the corporate documents for Herrera Construction. Fanning the papers out like a trophy, I announced, and now, the pièce de résistance. Evan, my son's business partner, I hope you've enjoyed the charade of being a successful entrepreneur, because it turns out that 80% of the company you believed you helped build has belonged to me from the very beginning. Daniel's face went pale, and he sank into his chair as if struck by a blow. Impossible, he whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. The contracts, the clients, the startup capital, they all came from us, from our contacts and investments. I cut him off gently. No, I said firmly. Every major deal you've closed in the past 8 years was coordinated through my industry connections. The land for the Los Pinino residential complex, which earned you $5 million in profit, was bought through a trust I set up. All construction funds came from my accounts, funneled through various channels to look like external financing. Evan then rose, pacing like a caged animal, face tense with confusion. But why? Why do this? Why lie to us all these years? His question was the perfect prelude to the most satisfying moment yet. Because why I lied to you, I repeated slowly, allowing a hint of genuine emotion to seep into my tone, is the real reason I wanted this day to come. I never lied to you, I clarified. You just never asked the right questions. You assumed I was poor, a burden. You built your entire relationship on that false premise. Sarah's tears weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of dread, trembling at the thought of what this meant for her future. Damaris, please, she begged, voice cracking. We can fix this. We can change. We can treat you better. You don't have to punish us. Punish you? I interrupted, genuinely surprised. I'm not punishing you, Sarah. I'm simply withdrawing financial support from those who've proven unworthy. I pulled out my cell and dialed a familiar number. Marcus Dearest, yes. Proceed with all cancellations immediately. What cancellations? Evan asked, voice trembling with dread, already sensing the inevitable. First, I explained, the immediate termination of all monthly transfers you've been receiving. Second, the eviction notice, 30 days, to vacate this mansion. And third, revoke all permits for the vehicles registered in my name. Daniel turned deathly white. But what about the current contracts, the projects? He stammered. They will be transferred to new management, I replied calmly. I've decided to bring in professionals, not those still clinging to delusions of their own success. Daniel, your involvement in Herrera Construction ends today. Make sure you've saved some of the 10% commission I've been paying you all these years. And yet, the most devastating revelation was still pending. I pulled out my phone once more and played a recording I had captured earlier. Sarah's voice, full of cheerful mockery. She had been delighted to finally move into her luxury apartment, thanking me for taking such good care of her. She had no idea that Sunset Gardens was essentially a prison for the elderly, where she would be medicated into submission. Silence descended on the room, heavy and suffocating. The guests stared at us in horror, finally grasping the extent of the deception. Edward and Frances looked shattered, as if faced with the chilling realization that their daughter was a sociopath. I continued, I also have recordings of your meetings discussing my declaration of mental incompetence, your plans to fake medical reports, bribe lawyers, and even sell my house using forged documents. I watched as panic overtook them like wildfire. Evan sank deeper into his chair, burying his face in his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely more than a whisper. Mom, I'm sorry. We didn't know. If we'd known the truth, we'd have acted differently. But I cut him off, knowing that this moment of reckoning had only just begun. Do you honestly believe the real issue was that I lacked money? The truth wasn't just that you had plans to drug me in a nursing home, steal my modest savings, and dispose of me like garbage. My voice had turned icy, unwavering. No, Evan, the problem lay entirely in who you truly are as a person. That was the moment they finally understood. They had not only lost all their wealth and possessions, but they had done so right in front of witnesses who now saw their true motives. Their reputation, their status, their future, all of it disintegrated in just half an hour. The empire of lies they had meticulously built crumbled to ashes, and I was the woman who had ignited the fuse. 3 months after that Mother's Day lunch that changed everything, my life had reshaped itself in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. On that Monday morning, as I sipped my coffee on the balcony of my actual home, a luxury penthouse nestled in the heart of the financial district, I reflected on how truth had set me free, both spiritually and in my future prospects. From my 25th floor window, the entire city sprawled before me. Distant mountains, a winding river threading through skyscrapers, and the well-kept gardens of public parks. This had been my true home for 8 years, a sanctuary of calm and elegance that I had kept hidden while masquerading as a poor, needy grandmother. My apartment mirrored who I really was, an elegant woman with refined tastes, yet understated, intelligent and ambitious, grounded in reality. Walls adorned with original artwork from emerging local painters told a quiet story, not because they cost a fortune, but because I believed in supporting emerging talent. My library, filling an entire wall, housed biographies of female entrepreneurs, timeless novels, and intensive guides on finance I had studied for decades. The kitchen was my pride, equipped with state-of-the-art appliances where I cooked authentically, unlike the charade I kept up in my fake little house. I possessed an array of imported spices from around the world, professional-grade utensils, and a pantry always fully stocked. Cooking was no longer a necessity, but a passion I rediscovered with my newfound freedom. Yet, the most profound change wasn't in my surroundings, but in how I related to the world. For years, I had walked with my shoulders hunched and dressed modestly, avoiding any attention. Now, I walked tall, with the confidence of a woman who had seized complete control of her destiny. My routines had evolved: yoga classes at an exclusive studio, dinners at the city's finest restaurants, and most importantly, weekly gatherings with a new circle of friends. Mark, my lawyer, was no longer just my legal advisor. He had become one of my closest confidants. We met every Thursday afternoon in his office, not solely to review legal issues, but to plan new investments and philanthropic endeavors. Last week, during a review of my company's financials, he told me, "What you did wasn't just about reclaiming your power. You've created a Model A blueprint that shows women how to take command of their stories at any age. The restructured Herrera Construction Division was thriving far more than it ever had under Evan and Daniel's leadership. I had hired Elena Martinez, a 45-year-old civil engineer with an MBA and 20 years of experience managing large projects. In just 3 months, she had overhauled operations, introduced new quality standards, and secured contracts that doubled our projected profits. During our monthly meetings, Mrs. Martinez reported, "Clients are amazed by the transformation. Projects no longer face delays, communication is clear, and the quality exceeds expectations." Her professionalism proves I made the right call in removing the previous managers. My social life equally flourished in unexpected ways. Through yoga, I met a group of professional women, my age, retired doctors, ex-executives from multinationals, successful artists, and entrepreneurs women who, like me, had amassed substantial fortunes but preferred to stay low profile. One of them, Samantha, a 62-year-old former marketing director, often told me, "What I admire most about your story is that you didn't seek revenge for revenge's sake. You sought justice, and that makes all the difference." These women understood the unique challenges of succeeding in a society that still underestimated older women's power. But perhaps the most significant transformation was in my relationship with myself. For years, I had let others define my worth, treat me as invisible or insignificant. Now, for the first time in decades, I felt wholly aligned with my true self. I woke each morning excited about what lay ahead, not resigned to enduring humiliations. My morning routine had adapted to reflect this newfound confidence. After coffee and catching up on financial news, I spent an hour in my private gym, not to impress but to feel strong and vital. Then I carefully selected my clothes, not to hide, but to express exactly who I was, an accomplished, intelligent woman in complete control of her life. Weekends became a time to indulge passions I had long postponed. I enrolled in oil painting classes at an adult workshop, discovering I had a natural talent for landscapes. I joined a book club dedicated to biographies of remarkable women entrepreneurs. I even started tango lessons, not for a partner, but because I'd always wanted to learn and now finally believed I could. But what brought me the deepest satisfaction was my new philanthropic project. With Mark's assistance, I founded the Invisible Women Foundation, dedicated to helping older women victimized by financial family abuse. We collaborated with specialized lawyers, psychologists, and social workers to identify cases like mine and provide free legal and emotional support. The number of women we uncovered was startling. Frances Guerrero, the foundation's executive director, explained, "There are thousands of women manipulated financially by their own families, yet they lack the resources or information to stand up for themselves." Already, we had helped more than 50 women in situations similar to mine. One of our earliest beneficiaries was a 70-year-old woman, Eloisia, whose daughter had been siphoning her pension for 5 years, falsely convincing her she was too old to manage her own money. With our legal help, not only did Eloisia recover her funds, but she also pressed criminal charges against her daughter for elder fraud. During our last meeting, Eloisia, tears in her eyes, said, "You didn't just return my money, you restored my dignity. For the first time in years, I feel like a woman deserving of respect." Those moments reminded me why sharing my family's dark truth had been worth it. My new life also included simple pleasures I'd long forgotten, shopping for exactly what I wanted at the supermarket, donating generously to causes I cared about without guilt, traveling at will, dining at elegant restaurants, buying books without price checking, And most importantly, making all these decisions freely without needing anyone's approval. Unexpected recognition came when a journalist from a national newspaper caught wind of my story through the legal proceedings involving Evan and Sarah. Her article about the invisible multimillionaire who exposed family abuse went viral, turning me into an emblem for older women underestimated or exploited by their own relatives. Your story embodies something bigger, she told me during the interview. It's about the power women have to rewrite their stories at any age. The article sparked hundreds of letters from women sharing similar experiences, many of whom became new cases for our foundation. But the greatest lesson I learned was that true wealth lies not in money, but in living authentically and earning the respect we deserve. 6 months after that life-changing Mother's Day lunch, I received an unexpected call. It was Evan, my son, who had spent recent months living in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood, working as an insurance agent at a small firm. His voice on the phone sounded different, more humble, stripped of the arrogance that had characterized our conversations for years. "Mom," he said after a long, awkward pause, "I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I'd like to see you, just to talk, just to genuinely apologize." His voice faltered slightly at the end, and for the first time in decades, I could hear the boy he had once been before he became the man who betrayed me. I agreed to meet him, not because I had fully forgiven him, but because I understood that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves, not necessarily for the benefit of those who hurt us. We chose a quiet downtown cafe, neutral ground where we could both feel safe to speak openly. When I arrived, he was a different man. Where once he had always been sharply dressed in designer suits, now he looked tired, wearing simple, clean clothes, dark circles under his eyes revealing sleepless nights. He stood up as I entered, a sign of respect he hadn't shown in years. His first words were simply, "Mom," but then he stopped, as if all the rehearsed sentences had suddenly vanished from his mind. "I don't even know where to start. What we did to you, what I did to you, cannot be justified. No excuse can explain how we came to plan such cruelty." Sitting across from him, I studied his face, searching for signs of genuine remorse versus calculated deception. What I saw was a broken man, but not necessarily sorry for the right reasons. "Evan," I said softly, "tell me something. If I had truly been the helpless woman you believed I was, would you still think what you planned was wrong?" The question caught him off guard. I watched as his mind scrambled to find the right response, but in the end, he chose honesty. "Probably not," he admitted, looking down. "We would have justified our actions by convincing ourselves it was for your own good. We'd say you were too old to care for yourself, that the home was better for you, that selling your house was the smartest financial choice." "Exactly," I replied, a slight smile forming for the first time since this conversation started. "The problem wasn't that you didn't know I had money. It was that you decided my opinion, my wishes, my autonomy as a human being didn't matter. You treated me like a possession, something you could move from place to place for your convenience." Evan nodded, tears beginning to well up in his eyes. "You're right. Completely right. And I don't know how to live with that now that I've realized it." He poured out his feelings about the past few months, describing them as the hardest of his life, not just emotionally, but financially. Sarah had left him just a week after the collapse, taking what little they still had and moving back in with her parents in another city. She blamed him for everything. She says if I'd handled the situation with you better, none of this would have happened. he explained. Yet I knew she was just as cruel, just as manipulative. We were both culpable. His words reinforced what I already suspected. Even in the face of hardship, some people don't truly learn from their mistakes. Instead, they look for someone else to blame for the fallout. I shared with him my new life, my projects, the foundation I'd started to help women in similar situations. As I spoke, I saw his eyes widen in realization of what he had lost. Not just money or property, but the opportunity to truly know his mother, to forge an authentic bond with me. Then, quietly, he asked if there was any chance we could rebuild our relationship. His voice was small, yet hopeful. "I'm not asking for money," he added quickly. "I don't want anything from you. I only want to know. Is there any possibility that one day you could forgive me?" The reply I had been formulating over months of reflection and therapy came naturally. "Evan, I already forgave you," I told him. "Forgiveness freed me from the burden of resentment. But forgiving you doesn't mean I want us to reconcile immediately." I explained that trust is built through consistent actions over time, not just apologies in a cafe. If he truly wanted to mend what was broken, he would need to prove he had fundamentally changed as a person, that he was working on himself through therapy, understanding why he was capable of such cruelty towards his own mother. He needed to become someone who would choose to do the right thing, even when no one's watching. We parted ways that afternoon with a tentative, genuine hug, our first in years. I made no promises, but I didn't completely shut the door either. Time and his actions would decide if there was hope for us as a family. Looking back now, I realize that the greatest gift I gained wasn't revenge, but discovering who I truly was once I stopped pretending to be someone else. For years, I had lived in the shadows of my own potential, hiding behind a mask of humility, rooted in the fear of others' judgment. The woman I am today wakes each morning knowing her value, not because others tell her so, but because she has learned to value herself. I make decisions based on what I truly want, not on what I think others expect, and I surround myself with people who respect and support me, those who see my worth rather than tolerating me as a necessary burden. My story has become an inspiration for hundreds of women who write to me every week, sharing their own experiences of being underestimated, ignored, or abused by family members meant to protect them. Through the foundation, we have helped over 200 women regain their financial independence and emotional strength. Yet the most profound lesson I've learned is this: it's never too late to rewrite your story. At 65, when many believe life is already laid out, I prove that total reinvention is possible, as long as we have the courage to be authentic. The best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt us. It's building something so magnificent and genuine that their betrayal becomes a mere footnote in our story. The sweetest success is living so fully that those who once underestimated us realize everything lost when they chose not to value us. Today, I am richer than ever, not just in financial terms, but in self-respect, authentic relationships, and the peace that comes from living true to myself. More than any number in a bank account, that is the true treasure I found when I stopped hiding in the shadows of my own life. That moment, when I realized I had reclaimed not just my power, but my true identity, and yours was my favorite. Comment below what part of my story resonated most with you. Don't forget to like if you believe more women need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim their power.